So today we have Arpit, who's going to talk about some nice stories of Gujarat. And before that, we have the two lions of Gujarat with me, Mustaq Bhai and Bittu, who will talk about a bit of Gujarat. Kem cho?
Hello. Hi, Nick.
Kaise ja rahe ho? How are you doing?
Yeah, you're doing good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Mustaq Bhai, Bittu Bhai, you're live. You're live. The screen is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Good evening and happy Friendship Day, everybody. Thank you, Nick Bhaiya and Delhibird Foundation for arranging this informative talks since April 2020, about a year now. Today, the talk is on wild Gujarat, unique features of the westernmost state of India, Gujarat, with the largest coastline in the country. There are saline deserts of GRK and LRK, many grasslands and wetlands, plus the country's first marine national park in Jamnagar, consisting of 42 islands, many of which are fringed with coral reefs. All these factors have bestowed my state with an interesting diversity of flora and fauna. Plus, Gujarat has a special spot on the Central Asian flyway. Yes, as a part of the natural cycle, we have the dodos and the GIBs. Now, Yashodhan Bhatia will introduce Arpit. Just a moment.
Hello, friends. Good evening. Okay, I'll introduce Arpit first. Arpit will talk about the wild side of Gujarat. He is currently working with WWF in Delhi. He got initiated into wildlife at a very young age. His childhood has been spent in the jungles interacting with various types of wildlife. As he grew up, he started traveling and has visited most of the wildlife areas of our country. Luckily, his work is his pleasure. He is also a nature and conservation photographer. Since the past few years, he has been traveling a lot. He has just arrived in Delhi a few minutes ago. His expertise in using technology for conservation has made a huge difference in the decision-making process, which is data-driven. Big data collection systems and GIS developed by him will help wildlife conservation in a big way. Now handing over to our dear and soon-to-be Dr. Arpit. Over to you, Saib.
Before you start, Arpit, I just tell everyone that if anybody has any questions, they can put them in the chat box. And after the talk is over, Arpit will take the questions up. Thank you. Arpit, to you.
Thanks, Nick, Mustaq, Bittu, for a flattering introduction. But this particular one is more about the wild side. It's more about what Gujarat has to offer in terms of the wilderness, the birds. I'm intentionally leaving out mammals as such, but I'll talk a bit on that. So, like Bittu and Mustaq has mentioned, and I was not at all a birder. I was more of a marine guy, been traveled almost all the island of Gulf of Kutch, working mostly as a volunteer, but just looking at those, those undersea beauties and corals and this. So let's come to Gujarat. It kind of marked its name on the ornithological literature through Red Munia, which is actually named from Ahmedabad, the next or nearly capital of Gujarat. And it somehow got into the specimens from Ahmedabad to the linears and then questioned it as a Fringilla Ahmedabad. But more than that, also Gujarat has a many historical linkages. Many Gujaratis were pioneer seafarers, particularly with the African coast. The Portuguese, the Goa was nearby, and those kind of stuff. So we all know that dodo used to happen. Like the first authentic drawing were come from Jahangir's court. But how the dodo came into India, so it actually came down by via Surat through Portuguese-controlled Goa. The whole area used to be controlled by Portuguese, and two dodos were actually landed in Surat. One died. One finally reached to the to get it painted, and that has been documented by an English traveler called Peter Mundy. Other than that, Gujarat has been, kind of widely studied. You have a Bleeth, Barnes, H.E. Barnes has done a lot of work. Humes, Butler has come up with a kind of authoritative a catalog way back. Ripley, Fernita Stoliska of the famed Yarkand mission, as well as the Stoliska's Bush, to be more precise. There are a couple of less known, like Coles Walter. I'll talk a brief about him. Salim Ali, we all know, pretty grand old man. And I'll share some of the rare pictures of Salim Ali taken on Pirotan in his 80s Pirotan visit. Probably I was not born when he came down to visit Pirotan. Dham Kumar Si, one of the royal family of Bhavnagar, who actually contributed a lot in terms of bustard and the florican conservation. So the first guy, Walter Coles, is probably the last American geologist who's been in the British era, kind of worked with Indian collections, or heavily collected, I would rather say, almost 60 to 70,000 birds. He has described almost 176 species, but surprisingly, he described many subspecies and species from Gujarat. So, for an example, mottled wood owl of Gir, or the Saurashtra region, is a totally different subspecies. Is amongst the largest of streak oscillata. That's why it's named as a grandis. Other than that, also the Lanius Kathiavarensis, Prinia hosgoni, Pallidor, Jostrop amabilis, I mean Papilobrosa amabilis. These are the Oriental white eye. These are actually described, and a type locality are from Gujarat. So there are a lot of work on earliest explorers and ornithologists to describe. And unfortunately, Walter's collection has been kind of overlooked because of not having enough of the series to describe, or to keep it as the valid subspecies. So many are assumed kind of mixed with the nearby subspecies, or the based on a clinical failure. Another interesting thing I found about Coles was Coles has a very good friend, Chand Thakur Premchand, and Chand actually won a case against him and got him in those time around like $15,000, which was like a really great amount in 1960s. And if you can kind of want to kind of enlighten this one, these guys were the holotype collected from Meghalaya of Ali's Thras, or Juthora Salim Ali, was actually given it to Thakur and Cole's collection. There are a lot of subspecies as well as species of birds have been named after places in Gujarat, like the earlier mentioned red outawart. You have Orthorhynchus sutorius gujaratus, which is a subspecies of Delhibird. Kathiavarensis. The same way, many species have been described after people. Dharm Kumar Singh ji, Sandlar from Krishna Kumar Singh ji, Dharm Kumari, Sardar Pateli from the Sardar Patel, and Humayuni. So these are mostly described from Gujarat, but named after various people, either belonging to Gujarat or from outside Gujarat. Many taxa have been described and is very restricted to Gujarat, like that includes Saxicola means white-browed bush-shat, and strix, so mottled wood owl also. So let's talk about Rahul Dharmkumarsi, better known as Bapa. He belongs younger, and he played a very important role in a wildlife policy, basically guiding in just after the independence. He has wrote a lot of books and papers. Particularly the most important one I would like to cite is The Birds of Saurashtra, kind of a first authentic work on birds region. And much of his work were pioneered, particularly with respect to the bustards, Lesser Florican, Great Indian bustard. he was able to, use a decoy and make a male laser florican to mount on the decoy female. He discovered a couple of species also with Varney, and almost like more than 100 scientific papers on his credit. Ali, I mean, we all are familiar with him. And these are kind of a rare photograph I happened to stumbled upon. And there's an interesting story behind these photographs. I actually bought a one geology book from the flea market, and the dust cover has this 5 to 6 frame. The last rightmost image, the central figure is late Laukumar Khacher, who kind of initiated, belongs to Jagsadan royal family in Gujarat, and he kind of initiated the whole environmental education movement in India. It we kind of me, Bustag, Bittu, and there are so many people who's actually kind of camps were actually kind of a catalyst to derive or move our aim towards wilderness and wildlife and nature and the conservation aspects. So here he's citing the most the famous bird of Gulf of Kutch, I would say, crab plovers. There is, in terms of ornithological literature, also there has been a lot of work has been done. The first, I would say, Palin's Birds of Kutch, uh, Barnes Handbook of Bombay Presidency, because earlier Gujarat used to be a part of Bombay Presidency. One of the work is by Butler. He was posted in northern Gujarat in Disa as the resident, British resident, and a catalog of birds of Sindh, Kutch, Kathiawar, and northern Gujarat and Mount Abu is kind of a creates a really important baseline for the birds of India. Later on, Lester come up with the birds of Kutch, the kind of a more of a second edition of Palin's work. Ali did with the birds of Kutch as well as birds of Gujarat with Gujarat Research Society. And Dharm Kumar ji's is birds of Gujarat were kind of most of the really pioneer and older ornithological work. So we have almost like a 530, 550 birds now in Gujarat. But the thing about Gujarat is many rare species, as like most of the gyps vulture, bustard, sociable lapwing. Forest owlet has been now been regularly sighted in Gujarat, particularly the southern Gujarat portion. But what it makes Gujarat so special and so unique, if you look at like it has the largest coastline, and around like 9% TGA is under forest cover. On top of it, you have almost like 4 forest types, and you have a varied physiography. Assembling all of this with the migratory birds flyway, and if you look at the Central Asian as well as the West Asian, East African flyway, Gujarat becomes a kind of a first stopover for the incoming bird population. So the migration is like really a unique phenomena to witness, and I spent almost 4 to 5 years studying the migration pattern on Pirotan Islands and looking at their flocks coming and going, their breeding plumage. We all know the shorebirds are in winter plumage morely drab and black and white gray tones, but once you go and look them into breeding plumage, they are like really astounding creatures. This all comes into kind of a very beautiful unique assemblage, but at the very same time the Gujarat is kind of a famous for the mass, the flocks. If I mean I'm recently starting my posting my older data diaries over the eBird, and I'm damn sure all the reviewers will get soaked, but we kind of know that looking at like 3,000 or 4,000 crab plovers is not a big deal. I do remember once I submitted some data for Asian wetland census, and it has around 3 to 4,000 black-necked grebe. Dr. Rahmani has to actually, we have to take him to the Charakla salt pans to make him, confirm, like this is not possible. I'm like, yeah, And the most beautiful site, particularly for the Charakla Solpan, which is in the Gujarat and now the Dwarka district, is when those grebes are, kind of feeding in a center of a salt pond. It's a very large salt pond areas, and suddenly a migratory peregrine swoops over. In a second, those 3,000 to 5,000 birds just disappears under water.
Hi, Arpit. We've lost you. Mustaq, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Just find out Arpit क्या कर रहा है.
Very. He's on his mobile, so maybe just a minute. Back.
I think he's logged off. He'll probably log in again. He's probably had some issues with.
Got the next connection. He was on his mobile. He's on the highway. He's just checked into some Airbnb place on the outskirts of Delhi. Let's give him a few minutes.
Just try calling him.
Yeah. Or somebody must have called him on his phone. I'll check it. His phone is engaged.
He's joined in again.
Admit, yeah, admit. Somebody must have called him on his phone.
Unmute yourself, Arpit. Unmute yourself.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. The internet misbehaved. So let me start with something very, very strange. I mean, we normally imagine Gujarat as more of a dry, brown colored. But if you go towards the south of Gujarat, to Dangs, Sulpaneswar, Ratanmal, those kind of areas, it's pretty much green. It's a kind of extension to Western Ghats. And you got most of assemblage species of Western Ghats, the northernmost age out here. It could be the leaf birds or the brown wood owls, pied woodpeckers, owls. And that actually gives a very unique, and it's more or less explored, heavily changed habitat. There are many species which are now coming back, like jungle fowls has been now regularly been sighted in Dangs. There have been a couple of news of the tigers also getting strayed and in and out. Unfortunately, because those areas are more or less recovering in terms of the earlier deforestation and that one. And for a larger mammal, this area actually lacks the prey base. There is very less population of deers, spotted deers, and sambals and like that. Now I talk my favorite area. It has like around 1,600 square kilometer of coastal line from Lakpat to go down to you have a mud flats, you have a coral reefs, you have a sandy beaches, probably some of the better ones, and many of are kind of far to reach, and like you have to plan it. You need to have a local people. In fact, me, Mustaq, and the kind of gang we used to have, and been traveled to almost all the 42 islands. And it just such a serene to visualize here. Ramki is amongst the crab plover, Dicky is trying to wait for the high tide to come in, and I'm trying to photograph crab plovers over the Dabdaba Island. It's one of the island in Gulf of Kutch. This actually the migration season, and the species should start somewhere around like September, October. They start arriving in a smaller number, but the best time to see the waders galore is during their return migration. Almost all, and particularly in the Gulf of Kutch, Jamnagar area, there are many islands, 42 islands, and they do stop over for a 1 week or 2 week. They feed themselves of enough protein and fat so they can, sustain the long migration studies. And you see like thousands. I mean, counting like 10,000 bird in a single flock through block methods is like easiest one. You can easily you got like totally tired of seeing flock and flock. And amongst this wader there would be rarity regularly turning up. It could be dowitcher, it could be red knot, and those are the species which we really look after and try to conserve and try to document. Many of this, like this Saunders tern, it's kind of the best sighted within Gujarat in Kutch coast, and it's been split from the little tern. It has I spent almost like 3 years studying their breeding biology along with the little tern. They are like very unique, and my main interest was it used to consider as a subspecies of little tern, Albifron saundersi, but now it becomes more like a dedicated. And what's the impact of that in terms of breeding biology? They are difficult to identify. I'll not go much detail into identification, but if you ever see them mating, the little tern will approach the female from the side, whereas and give the fish, the bat, to lure the female for the courtship. Whereas Saunders terns will normally jump from the top and give a fish or a crustacea from the top. So that's a finer breeding biology, but that actually gets into how the species and the evolution has worked upon. Another fascinating bird, crab plover, found it's like very common bird. I mean, like for a Jamnagar people, it feels more like a next to sparrow. Some of the part you can easily sight 3,000, 4,000 birds, but slightly difficult to reach being islands. Cranes, particularly in a winter, the whole coast of Jamnagar as well as Porbandar up to say Verawar and the Amreli will be flooded with the cranes. They come in thousands and thousands. My largest count was somewhere around 1 lakh plus 1,27,000 plus bird in one of the wetland, a kind of a dam in Porbandar with me and led Dr. Parasaria. And amongst this crane, we have observed a very peculiar thing, that some birds will let you come really close, and some birds will, kind of keep a very distance. And that, my guess, is probably because there are two populations wintering, and one population which is kind of afraid of human comes over a more of a disputed and heavy hunting prone area, where other one is more a coastal migratory. Like the rarity turning up like a coast Caspian plover and the common ring plover is in fact pretty much common in the coastal area. Great note, got crested grebe, terns. Another, like, I mean, can you believe this image has been shot in Jamnagar? I mean, on the Okha. It's a beautiful coral formations, mostly witnessed during a minus tide, which we used to, like every year we used to wait. It would be normally come in a May, June. It'll be a really scorching sun.
but it was a really amazing experience. And those marine environment and the creatures is actually very fascinating. You got a beautiful, like kilometers of the sea beaches. You have a variety of almost like 50 to 65 varieties of corals, soft corals. You got beautiful nudie branch, more like a Spanish dancers relative, flat ones, the dugong, whale shark, uh, and turtles, green, mostly green sea turtles. You will get it. On top of it, we spend like a really long time camping on those islands, doing like kind of a more of an exploratory activity, sighting dolphins, porpoise. Is pretty common in most of the Gulf of Kutch. So many times people come down, but this any venture into a sea requires like proper planning. You have to look at the tide times and the port and the boat arrangements and permissions and all those kind of another of my favorite area, I would say, is Great and Little Run of Kutch. I spent almost like 6 years in Kutch region, and for a birder, anyone heard the name Kutch comes the Flamingo City. It's a unique seasonal wetland where Indus and I mean all the other rivers flood, and in a monsoon they fill it up, so it becomes more sweeter water. But later on, when you come down in a say May, June, there would be puddles, and all will turn into a salt. You'll see like thousands of, and this seasonal wetland and the changes in salinity actually are responsible for having a large number of aquatic insects and the fishes. In fact there is a one species Aphinus dispar. It's a small killifish. They actually survive in this, so this whole wetland becomes a salt. But the next year, when the fresh water turns in after monsoon, the fish egg survives, the killifish egg survives, and they again come back into a thousands of number. And on this, most of the pelicans, the flamingos, gulls, terns, waders, they actually feed upon. And this is the salt desert. This is my actually first visit to Flamingo City. Unfortunately, at that time, I didn't have the camera. This is from one of camp BSF guys' camera we have used. Simple non-lens point and shoot kind of old. It's so amazing to see those vast, salt-filled land. There is not a single a tree or a forget about tree. There won't be a blade of grass exist on this. And amongst this, those islands, the small formed islands in Gulf, in sorry, Great Run of Kutch is really mesmerizing. One should have must visit this area. And now the tourism, there are a lot of tourism activities also sponsored here. But I was lucky enough to, before all this so-called development activities start, I was able to witness this. Another fascinating fact about Kutch. The Kutch name is, as per mythology, comes from Kachua, means turtle. And if you go back and, the turtles actually sink in and comes up, sink and come up in a water. The same way the mythology says the Kutch has been, submerged many times. I think it was 6 or 7 times as per mythology, and it has submerged and again emerged 7 times. Now, this is actually a mythology, but it has a very valid scientific proof. If you go to mines in Pandro, in northern Kutch, you will find the same strata, a kind of a cross section of a land. You will have the grass fossils, you have a leaves, then you will come into more of a woody fossils, then coral reef, then the dinosaurs, then mammals. In fact, this region has many of the first fossilized animal discoveries. That includes whale, dugong, many species of dinosaurs, canids have been described from Kutch as a prehistoric animals. And there are some regions where it literally feels like you're walking in a coral reef, but a fossilized one. So the pictures you are seeing, it's all fossilized corals. You will have a starfish, you have a sails, you have corals, you have a sea urchin fossils, and it's such a unstable, geologically unstable region that the process of fossilization, not only the carbonization but the crystallization has also happened. So one of the pillar I had seen was actually a complete palm wood fossil which is crystallized in a nature. Another Dalmatian pelicans, one of the uh, uh, cool inhabitant of little and greater run of Kutch is the greater hupula. Uh, Seeing them in their habitat, which is like a flat land, nothing growing out there, not a blade of grass, some kind of a washed ashore piles of wood or something like that sort of. But they are actually kind of accustomed to those 45, 52-degree centigrade temperature. But at the very same time, they dig up the died crustaceans and survive from those streams and fish from the mud flats, the dried flats of the run. This area is also very famous for the raptors and the Stoliska's bush chat. It was actually described from, excuse me, Rapper. It's a western part of Kutch. Fernand Stoliska has described from Rapper, and it just disappears from Gujarat for a month or two. They move in probably June or July. They are back in August, mid August, and there is nothing has been known about where they are breeding, what kind of a clutch they have, what nesting pattern, or where they nest, or what kind of a nest they have. So this bird is another remarkable, notorious in terms of making sure they are hide enough. Another famous bird is Grey hypocoleus. Probably apart from Middle East, this is the only place where you can see the bird in winter. And this bird has a very peculiar side fidelity. I mean, very high side fidelity. They roost in the Salvador persica or pilu, locally known as bushes. And in a daytime, it's very hard to find them. So you have to either be there in early in the morning, else in the evening at the roosting time when they are about to enter into those roosts, and they'll give you 10 to 15 minutes of glimpse, and then again they disappear into the vastness of run. Gypsies, there've been enough. Imperial finches, some of the desert finches. Now, if the another speciality of about to lose kind of a bird is the great Indian bustard. I was lucky enough to see them in Nalia grassland, almost like 70, 11. The highest number was like, I think 16 or 17 birds I'd seen together, but now probably one or two birds remains. The best now is in Rajasthan, the last stronghold of the population. Another interesting bird, Bristol grass bird. This is another a kind of a nomad kind of a bird. It turns up, never know. Me and one of my friend Nirav Bhatt from Surendranagar has actually found this bird in Kutch, regularly breeding. Sykes lark, another country endemic. During one of the trip, me and Ramki Srinivasan of Conservation India, we were actually trying our luck to find the elusive caracal. We worked for like 5 to 6 days in different part of Kutch. We didn't find it. On the last day, we moved to Nalia grassland, tried to, if we don't find caracal, let's try for a bustard, and we didn't find it. Luckily, while coming down from the watchtower, we got this owl, which was more like a, and we kind of ignored it. Me and Ramki, like, oh, it's another sorted owl, just leave it. We are tired, and let's hit the road. And surprisingly, we took a photo, and while just getting into a car, we thought like, let's take a couple of pictures and see it. And the orange's eye struck me, and here it is. It was the first photographic record of long-eared owl. So you never know in Gujarat what turns up in terms of rarity, and they become a regular. Next day, many of friends try to find this bird again, but there was no luck. This is a more common Eurasian eagle owl or rock eagle owl now. The larks, the wetlands. I mean, Gujarat has like plenty of them. Like it has been a culture, and like not like other part of India where every town or every village would have a one village pond. But it has been kind of a loss on the track of losing in the other part of India. But in Gujarat, most of the village tanks and small lakes harbors amazing diversity of birds. So in fact, you don't have to go anywhere else. You will have ample in a village, ample birds in a village tank. You'll have a kind of a spotted crag, darters, and a lot of breeding populations also exist out here. The second is like the largest part of the scrub for Gujarat is a kind of a thorny scrub forest. Take it from Kutch to Kathiawar to Saurashtra Peninsula, where you'll find silverbills, the white-tailed Iora or Marshall's Iora, again speciality of Great Run of Kutch, white-napped teat, Nigers, Indian. But what drives these birds into, like thousands of cranes, kind of a jostling with playing with the farmers, and they just don't give a, shit. They are just probably it's kind of a culture. It's kind of of our own, the way we kind of respect. And this image just reminds me like, this happens in nearly all the villages of Gujarat, and it's kind of a less hunting, or I would say nearly no hunting, boost up the birding scenario in Gujarat. Thank you. There are so many acknowledged people, but some of them. Over to questions and answer.
Thank you, Arpit. We have now opened the chat box for any questions you may want to ask us. And start by please.
Yes, sir. So anybody has any questions? There was somebody who wanted to know the name of the birds, so we have asked them to check with Arpit directly later on, not right now. So Arpit bhai,
Yep.
Why don't you share some stories about your attack by the leopard in Jamnagar?
Yeah, indeed. There's been a way back, Indian Pita came down, and we were more. I was going there alone, and it was a very old, abandoned, princely time limestone mine. So it's in the center, and there is a road on the periphery, or kind of a track to get down to this. And in that one, this pita has nested, and I was kind of observing their nesting behavior. Suddenly, it was overgrown monsoon, and there was a small track where I had kind of occupied myself into it, and so there was no other way to move around. It was quite a thorny and grassy overlook. There was this female leopard, which I came to later on know that it's a leopard, and it was just sitting back, and I started, kind of clicking my camera because of that noise. Probably the female got disturbed, tried to run, and I was actually, she actually jumped over me, and my whole right hand side of back got scratched because of that. And then that whole thing has happened in a split second. It was just like, something just gone over me, and it ran away. And then when it started climbing up, I realized it's a leopard. Unfortunately, in those time I didn't have the cell phone, and probably there was no network also. I have to actually drive down. I waited there for 1 hour because I was so fearful of the leopard, because she just moved and probably might have a cub or something. And then I have to, with those torn jeans and t-shirt, I have to drive down 30 kilometers back to Gujarat, Jamnagar. So yeah, one of the most important thing about Gujarat is you see the birds in a bulk. You see, a huge number of migratory as well as the resident populations existing out there. There is one question, the birds and types are increasing or decreasing. I would say the types or the species are kind of increasing over the year. We have so many birders. I mean, virtually every larger town has 10 at least 5 to 6 good birders who are actually checking out all the birds. So in terms of species, yes. In terms of numbers, I would say more or less stable, not much increase I have seen or decrease I have seen. Hotspot near Baroda, Ramaswamy has asked. There are a lot of wetlands, the central Gujarat portion. There are a lot of wetlands nearby Baroda, which you can try out. And in fact, you don't need to go to those, much celebrated places. Most of my birding happens with, kind of a unknown or lesser known village ponds or the habitats I discover while driving and stuff. Now, Maitreya asks, what's the best way between Saunders and Littleton in winter? Maitreya, I would suggest the call, if they're vocal enough, or you can make out the call. Second, the primaries. The Little has the outermost 2 primary dark, but Saunders has the 3 primaries. So, but yeah, again, there are molt and those kind of things. So that's also tough, but the best way to identify them is in hand in winter. It's really tough. Another point I would put is the gray rump of Saunders will actually take it away. Pia asked about GIB, Bunny grassland and surrounding areas. Pia, I really doubt the chances of GIB in Gujarat is very, very fragile. Not more than like 3-4 individuals max, and a heavy development coming in would be a tougher choice for the birds to survive.
Thank you. I think that were all the questions. You want to add anything, Mr. Bhai?
Yeah, like somebody is asked to suggest the top 5 spots which we could visit during a week's itinerary. Arpit, can you please tell us?
The best itinerary for visiting Gujarat would be fly into Ahmedabad. So I'll kind of start with Ahmedabad to Ahmedabad. Ahmedabad, move to Kutch, Little Run, Great Run of Kutch based on the species. It will require you around like 3 to 4 days there, and then do Jamnagar, Porbandar coast, and return. You can skip over on the Nal Sarovar and reach back within 6 days to fly. But ideally, Gujarat would require like more than like 10 to 12 days at least. Ideally, put it up like the same circuit from Porbandar, go to Gir, to Velavada, and come to back to Ahmedabad. Most of the South Gujarat birds, you can definitely, if you want to have a state checklist, you can try over Dangs, Vasda, but that's kind of a slightly distance and does not fit into a more regular Guju birds kind of itinerary.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That was very fascinating and a nice insight to the wild Gujarat. I thank you all. Thank you all for joining in.
Thank you.
And do join us next week for our final talk in the season 2 session. Shashank Talvi, who just spent a month in the Nicobar, wants to tell us some stories about the Nicobar. So next Sunday we have Nicobar in our final talk this season.